Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. So as you can see behind me, God is doing all sorts of wonderful things for Mark and I, and just really feeling super blessed these days. Mark is doing the videos kind of showcasing our transition and how God has moved in our life and kind of what that looked like and where we're going. And in the meantime though, I'm going to be doing at least one video a week, maybe two if I'm lucky, on the area of narcissism and the Antichrist spirit. They are two and of the same, but I really just feel God putting on my spirit to talk to you guys about what this dynamic looks like and kind of maybe filling in some of the blanks for why relationships are going the way they are, and most importantly, how you can find healing from trauma and from narcissistic abuse moving forward. So that's kind of the goal and what I'm hoping to do. And today I wanted to talk to you guys about projection. It is really two sides of the same coin. And the reason why I say that is because I think many of us know when people are projecting their bad behavior on us. We might be aware of that as thinking that is only what projection is. But today I wanted to talk to you also about the fact that we often project our own good nature onto other people. And what I mean by that is two things can be happening simultaneously. Is that someone who is generally good-natured will be projecting themselves onto perhaps an evil person, and they're being allowed to get away with a lot of things. In the same way that somebody who is evil is projecting their bad behavior on perhaps someone who is generally good, and they are assuming that that person is doing bad things. And so I really want to talk about that today and kind of what that means, because it's dangerous in both respects. Okay, so let's start with what is projection. I don't know if you guys remember, but back in the day, we used to have what's called like projectors in our classrooms. And so there would be a picture on the projector and a light would shine it on the wall. So it would take that picture that's on the projector and it would move it onto the wall. It would be visible somewhere else. So it's kind of like a form of displacement, right? So we're taking it from one spot and we're moving it somewhere else. Now, when we do that in human projection, essentially what we're doing is we're displacing emotions or qualities or characteristics. We're taking the emotions of one person and then we are kind of reflecting it or projecting it onto somebody else or something else in order to absolve ourselves of those feelings. So this can be done with good emotions and good characteristics and good qualities, as well as bad. It doesn't have to always be bad. I think maybe easy way to think of this would be, I'm not sure if you ever heard somebody tell you if you're in a relationship with someone and they start to accuse you of being unfaithful, that's usually a sign, a red flag that that person is being unfaithful to you. Now, this of course implies that you haven't been unfaithful and you haven't given them any reason to think that you have been unfaithful. But the reason why that has been said is because they're talking about projection. Someone who is being unfaithful, whether that be actually in person, whether that be watching pornography, whether that be having some type of virtual adultery, all of those things would weigh on the person's conscience and make them feel guilty. And rather than admitting to themselves that they are in fact the adulterer, they will often try to project it onto their spouse and accuse them of the very same thing that they are actually doing. So that's probably the easiest way to talk about projection. Hopefully you guys can understand. Maybe you've been in a situation like that. Perhaps you've done it to somebody else, right? When you were younger or even at this age, I don't know. But that is a form of projection. When you take your own fears and insecurities and the things you don't want to own yourself and put it on somebody else. This often happens with narcissistic people. So narcissistic people, they use projection as one of their defense mechanisms because they cannot tolerate their sin. They cannot tolerate, it's not that they can't tolerate the sinful behavior. They cannot tolerate knowing that their behavior is wrong because they want to believe that they're perfect. And so rather than admitting fault, they will try to deflect, manipulate, gaslight, project their way out of admitting fault. Okay? So this is obviously problematic if you're on the receiving end of their projection because you're often left confused. Today, though, I want to talk to you about the fact that you might be projecting your good nature on somebody else, and this is going to be equally problematic. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when you're constantly giving people the benefit of the doubt who don't deserve it. So if you have somebody in your life who is saying, with their words, very unkind things, and their behavior is very unkind, but you're constantly saying, oh, you know what, they probably are just having a bad day, they don't really mean it, they're just feeling stressed, and you're constantly justifying and making rationalizations for why somebody has bad behavior, then you might be at fault for projecting your own nature on somebody else. This is a problem because you're living in not real reality, okay? You're living in hopes and dreams rather than what's actually going on. It's very important that you start to pay attention. If you really want to get out of unhealthy relationships, you have to pay attention to what people are saying and what they're doing, and you have to pick up on the inconsistencies. Evil people are inconsistent. What they say and what they do will not match up. And oftentimes what they are doing is just justifying, rationalizing, manipulating, gaslighting, and trying to get away with their bad behavior. And if you're constantly projecting your good nature on them, which is what they look for people who will allow them to get away with their bad behavior, then you're actually helping to cause the cycle to continue because you're not confronting them with the bad behavior and they have no incentive to change. One thing that, I really would suggest that you guys listen to if you haven't, it's called The People of the Lie. I believe it's by Dr. Scott Peck. But if you just go into a search engine and type in People of the Lie, then I would listen. There's 2 volumes and they're both fantastic. He does a lot of dialogue, so you're able to really experience the interaction with what he calls evil people, because this type of condition does need a name, and I think that it can be difficult to say that someone's evil, but there are characteristics that would distinguish somebody as being evil. And that is going to be a great place for you to start. It's just fantastic. What I really like about him is that he states that, good and evil is on a continuum. So some people are really, really good, and some people are really evil, and most of us are somewhere in between, right? And God talks about this in the Bible where he mentions a seared conscience. And the seared conscience happens because we allow ourselves to get away with evil behavior, right? So wherever you are in the continuum, maybe you're somewhere in the middle and you're sometimes good and sometimes you do evil things, right? But evil begets more evil and good begets more good. So the more you focus on doing good things, the better you will become. And the more you are positioned to do evil things, the easier doing evil becomes. And this is where the seared conscience comes into play, is that if you may initially think that something that you're doing is wrong and you feel guilty about it, but if you're allowed to continue in that behavior without the consequences or the condemnation of doing the evil behavior, over time, that feeling of guilt and remorse goes away because there's nothing in your environment to suggest that it's bad. it becomes permissible. And then that's where also in the Bible where we talk about people will call good evil and evil good, that's what happens. Eventually, the things that were evil, because we allowed them to happen for so long, are not considered evil anymore and might even transition in that person's mind to being viewed as good. Okay, so this is why it's so important that we do not enable bad behavior. One, so beautiful out here. I wrote down 2 questions that you can really ask yourself to make sure you're not doing this. So first is, do you make judgments based on actual evidence or on your feelings? Now, many of us know that narcissists believe that feelings are facts, okay? And so you might be on this continuum of being a good person, but still have narcissistic tendencies. Perhaps you grew up in a narcissistic home, and so your viewpoint is still is narcissistic, but just you don't have such negative behaviors because maybe you've learned from it or you've been in healthier relationships, so you don't have to use your defense mechanisms. But you shouldn't be basing how you judge other people on how you're feeling. You should be basing it on actual facts, okay? So whether you are telling yourself that someone is good when all of their behavior points to being evil, or whether you're saying that somebody is evil even though they don't do anything to warrant you calling them evil, in both cases you are operating from a very immature emotional way. You haven't grown up emotionally. I don't know if I'm making sense in that way, but like you have to graduate from basing everything from your own lens and to be able to truly be empathetic, to understand that other people are operating in a completely different sphere than you. They're a completely different person than you, entirely different. And so you can't project yourself onto them because they might not be like you at all. Okay, I hope that makes sense. The other question you can ask is, are your opinions of other people based on what they actually say and do, or what you think their intentions are? Okay, so again, if somebody is calling you horrible names and they're hitting you, it doesn't matter what you think is going on, and actually it does you a really disservice if afterwards you're like, well, they had a bad childhood, so they probably don't mean to hit me. They probably are just feeling lonely. If you do that, you are not basing you're not living in reality. You're not living in truth. The truth of the matter is that person is acting in a very mean, cruel, abusive way to you. And if they haven't even told you that those are the reasons, or make exceptions for their own behavior, then you're essentially giving them a way out. And if they really are evil people who don't care about you, then you're projecting goodness onto people who don't deserve it, and you are perpetuating the problem, okay? One thing I do want to make sure that everyone understands is that abusive relationships require 2 unhealthy people, okay? Oftentimes, and I was stuck in this situation too, we like to think that, oh, I'm the good one, I'm the nice person, and this other person is evil and they're taking advantage of me. But healthy, whole, healed people do not tolerate abuse. So if you are in an abusive relationship, it means that you're gaining something from it. And this will be hard for you to hear, but it's the truth. And it will take a while maybe for you to figure out. You'll have to spend some time in prayer. But you're getting something out of it. And it could be as simple as just you feel most comfortable being the victim because it's the only thing that you are used to, right? And so you gravitate to that type of relationship because you're used to being in an abusive relationship. It feels comfortable for you. you're used to being in a state of victimhood. It feels comfortable for you. And so you actually feel safe in a twisted way because you perhaps were raised in that type of environment, and that's what feels comfortable for you. One of the things that I learned in my own journey is we have to step outside of what feels comfortable if we come from a background that has any type of trauma or abuse or unhealthy relationships, because what's comfortable for us is probably not healthy. And so we're going to have to be uncomfortable for a little while to try and retrain our body of how to be, okay? Really, I think that there's a couple things happening in abusive relationships. I think that the people who are acting in evil ways continue to do that because we let them, whether we want to admit that or not. If we stay in an abusive relationship, then we're telling them that it's okay for them to abuse us. And that's the truth of the matter. It's going to be hard to hear. It's hard for me to hear, but it's true. How else is somebody supposed to think, right? And I mean, severing the relationship and walking away doesn't mean that the person will necessarily change, but at least it means that you won't be abused anymore. I'm going to do another video about the difference between forgiveness and accepting abuse, because they're not the same thing, and evil people will often try to tell you that they are, and I want to make sure that that's clear. But today I really just wanted to talk about the projection, and to make sure that you're not projecting your good nature on people who don't deserve it, because it's going to get you into a lot of trouble, okay? Also want to just go over a few things to make sure that you're doing on a regular basis. So one, make sure that you are listening to what people say and you're watching what people do. And pay attention to the irregularities of those things. As I said before, healthy, whole people are not in abusive relationships. They just aren't. They recognize red flags. They know what it feels like to be in a healthy relationship, and they leave quickly when somebody is unhealthy. Okay, like somebody will come along and they can sense when they're being manipulated or gaslit, or when they're being lied to, or when somebody is being flat out abusive because they didn't grow up in an environment like that, or they're not used to being in relationships like that. It will repulse them. Evil to a healthy, whole, good person will repel them. If you are being drawn into, if you feel like there's some type of pull, then it means that you have brokenness in you. And it's very, very important that you try and figure out where that brokenness resides from so you can heal it yourself. And it's going to be hard because depending on how long you were in the unhealthy situation, we have got automatic nervous system and a parasympathetic nervous system. And what these things do is they create feedback loops. And so if you're in an abusive relationship for long enough, you may actually have somatic symptoms, which is just a fancy word for like physiological symptoms to certain words or sounds or experiences. And so you might have to fight against that, right? There may come a point in time where, you actually leave the abusive relationship or situation or environment, whichever the case may be for you. And now you're in a situation, oh, the water sounds so nice. Now you're in a situation of peace and calm, right? And you're going to have to retrain your body out of old triggers. And, you may hear something, you may hear somebody say something, even a tone of someone's voice, a smell, a car, like maybe the person who you were in a relationship with drove a certain type of vehicle, and now when you hear it, that might trigger something in you and you might feel anxious, right? These kind of like post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. And what needs to happen in the new space is you have to tell yourself, okay, it makes sense that I'm feeling that way, that I had that trigger response, but I'm in a healthy space now. I'm in a peaceful space now. I'm okay. And when you tell yourself that, long enough, then you reprogram your physical and mental state in order to have a new feedback loop. And so you won't have the same sort of triggers. But again, if you've been in an abusive relationship for a long period of time, if you were raised in like a narcissistic home where there was a lot of manipulation and control, where there was a lot of gaslighting, a lot of projection, then you will have a lot of unhealthy symptoms in you that needs to be worked through. You cannot, as a child, go through that type of environment and not have scars, not have brokenness, not have triggers. It just doesn't happen. So be honest with yourself, but also be gentle with yourself. I mean, if you're listening to my videos, it means that you want to get help, and Jesus can help you, right? Like, the first thing you need to do is just ask Jesus to come into your life. With God in your life, man, He's just changed everything for me, and He's brought me to a true place of peace, as you can see, just from putting my whole trust in Him. And because I have Him with me as my counselor, and the Holy Spirit is present, that I can face the traumas of my past, and I don't have to worry about what's going to happen to me, because He will give me strength and He will protect me. So I wouldn't do the things that I'm talking about without having Jesus, without having the Holy Spirit, without giving your life to God and surrendering and asking Him to pick up the pieces, because, well, I didn't do that, and I don't know what the fallout would be. I know that I tried to fix myself in the past without God, and I got myself into a lot of trouble, and that's where a lot of my addictive behaviors came from. So I wouldn't recommend it. And there's just something amazing about allowing God to put you back together again. And He brings you into a place that you just never could have really imagined for yourself. He knows me so well, but I wouldn't have known to ask for this. But I'm so happy with where I am in my life right now, and everything that He's done to help heal me. And it's still a process. And that's why, I feel like God wants me to share these videos with you to help you through the process yourself, and to share with you what He's teaching me, and to kind of give back to the kingdom in that way. So yeah, that's it for today. Just, really make sure that you're paying attention to reality and not getting swept up in somebody else's lie. And when you feel those red flags, when you feel like something isn't right, when your intuition is telling you that something is wrong, listen to it. And then make sure that you are not basing your judgments on your feelings or what you wish or hope other people were doing, right? I mean, it's really dangerous to constantly be letting people get away with bad behavior, because if we enable abuse, they'll continue to abuse us, but they'll also continue to abuse other people. And then we get the world that we're living in today, right? People can and will do evil if it seems like it's admissible. So I love you guys so much. I'll be back with another video. Bye.